Good afternoon and welcome to the Department of Industry, Innovation and Science webinar on the Australia Science and Research Fund, or ACSRF. My name is Mel Thorpe and together with my partner here, Sam, we're going to be running you through some basic information about applying for funding under the ACSRF program. Sam?
Thank you, Mel. So over the next half an hour or so, we'll run through some of the policy setting behind the current funding round for the ACSRF JRCs and then through the application process. Finally, we'll then chat about what interaction those who are successful can expect to have with the department.
A couple of housekeeping rules before we begin. You'll have the ability to see two screens at the moment if you're watching us. One will be vision of Sam and I and our dulcet tones talking through the presentation, and the other one will be some basic PowerPoint slides. You can toggle between both of those depending on how you'd like to view the presentation. Most important, however, down the bottom right-hand corner of your screen you'll see a little bubble. That's your opportunity to pose to us some direct questions. They'll come through to us here. But please, we would ask that you just include your email address so that if we can't answer, we run out of time, we've got the opportunity to get back to you and answer your questions. So please feel free to use that and they'll pop up for us here. Sam.
Thank you. So by way of further background in introduction, both Mel and I are from the Department of Industry, Innovation and Science. I'm from the Science Policy Branch, and as the policy owner of the ACSRF, we are responsible for negotiating with the Chinese government regarding various aspects of the ACSRF, including the Joint Research Centre component of it. So this includes negotiation of the priority areas, funding amounts and duration, and final decision on the successful projects to be funded. Speaking of the Chinese government, because we've been getting a lot of stakeholder questions on the status of the round in the Chinese system, it is the department's understanding that the Chinese government has undertaken public consultation on the guidelines for the bilateral funding. The department also understands that the Chinese government is undergoing its internal approval processes prior to opening the next round for application and publishing the call for applications online. There is a link on the Chinese Ministry of Science and Technology's website that provides the general requirements for applicants in Chinese. So please talk to your Chinese partners about this because they will be best placed to navigate the Chinese system for you. Mel is from AusIndustry. AusIndustry is a specialist program delivery arm of the department and will provide advice regarding its role in managing the assessment of the applications. The advice from AusIndustry and the advisory panel once the applications are assessed will come to us, to the Science Policy Branch, and we will use this information and the advice to consult with our Chinese counterpart regarding which projects to fund out of the JRC round. In terms of the background of the ACSRF, it supports strategic science, technology and innovation collaboration of mutual benefit to Australia and China. The ACSRF builds critical mass in areas of strategic priority and supports enduring partnerships between Australian and Chinese researchers. It also facilitates activities that encourage the application and commercialization of research outcomes to the mutual benefit of both countries. And it provides early career researchers the opportunity to gain the valuable and relevant Australia-China research experience. It comprises three elements, first being the joint research centres on which we are having this webinar. And the second is the thematic science workshops, seminars and symposia, including the long-standing Australia-China Science Academy Symposia series, and the third being the Young Scientists Exchange Program. For more information on the two elements, being the thematic science workshops and the Young Scientists Exchange Program, please visit www.science.gov.au/ACSRF. The ACSRF is jointly managed by the Australian Department of Industry, Innovation and Science and the Ministry of Science and Technology of the People's Republic of China. On joint research centres specifically, they are virtual centres which link Australian and Chinese research institutions conducting a portfolio of research-related activities. They facilitate a concentration of effort and outcomes beyond that which can be expected with individual research projects. For the round 3, grant amount will be up to 100% of eligible project costs, and there is no requirement to provide matched funding. The maximum grant amount is $1 million per grant over a maximum period of 3 years.
Could I just ask you a quick question on that? So there's no requirement to provide match funding, but they can contribute their own funds to the project if they want to?
Yes, they can. So part of the merit criteria goes into cash and in-kind contribution as well, so that's worth considering too. On the eligibility criteria, I note that it's critical for all intending applicants to read the guidelines thoroughly. This is because the guidelines document is the document that takes precedence over other forms of information for round 3. To be eligible for JRC's component of the bilateral fund, the lead organisation in the proposal must be an eligible entity. Only the lead organisation can submit the application and, if successful, enter into a grant agreement with the Commonwealth. The lead organisation will manage the Australian component of the JRCs. Your project must involve a Chinese primary partner who has submitted or is in the process of submitting a corresponding application to the relevant Chinese organisation, the China Science and Technology Exchange Centre, or CSTEC for short, in accordance with any guidelines or instructions issued by the Chinese Ministry of Science and Technology. The project must also have an Australian end user or industry partner that can apply the research outcomes. Other Australian and Chinese entities can be partners in a JRC application, and your application may also include other international partners. To be eligible, your project must involve research in a priority area, which we'll talk about in a moment, that has been specified by the department for the funding round, and the project must include eligible activities and eligible expenditure, which Mel will cover in a moment. We cannot fund your project if it receives funding from other Australian government funding sources for the same activities. For example, if you receive Australian government funding for your core activities, you will need to demonstrate that the activity you're carrying out for the JRC is additional to your core activities. If you have received JRC funding in a previous round, you're still eligible to apply, but cannot receive funding for the same activities that have been previously supported. On the priority areas for round 3, you'll see on the screen the high sector level priority areas. There are sub-areas as well which your project must involve research in. The priority areas align with the Australian Government's Industry Growth Centre sectors, as well as the science and research priorities and the practical challenges under them. These were determined in negotiation with our Chinese counterpart organisation, MOST, and it's worth noting that it is up to the applicant to determine how the project involves research in one of these priority areas.
Another question from me, sorry to interrupt.
That's all right.
So in the guidelines it talks about the 3 priority areas, and there's a little bit of extra information there.
Yes.
What advice can we provide to applicants about addressing those particular sub-elements?
Sure. The sub-elements are deliberately left reasonably broad to allow enough flexibility for the applicants to craft the application. So I have to sort of reiterate here that it's up to the applicant to draft their application to fit around those research priority areas.
So they're in the guidelines that they can see that information?
That's right.
True.
In terms of the eligible activities supported under the ACSRF JRCs, they must directly relate to the project and can include joint research projects with Chinese partners in priority areas of research, conferences, workshops, symposia, exchanges and secondments of personnel between Australia and China from the JRC's partners, new research-related information sharing and communication initiatives, and application of commercialization of research outcomes. We may also approve other activities as part of the eligible activities. On the merit criteria, which is covered in detail in section 8 of the guidelines, there are 4 broad criteria. I will not recite all of them here, but we'll highlight what we consider to be important from policy perspective. So please note that you will need to address each and every single one of these criteria, and the assessors will take note of any gaps in the application in this regard. On criterion 1, under aims and background, it's important for subsequent peer reviews to be able to access and verify any papers or publications cited there, so please ensure that anything that you reference is publicly available. Under significance and innovation, you'll need to explain why it's an important problem to be solved for both Australia and China. Under approach and methodology, key words in this criterion for your consideration are demonstrating approach that is appropriate to the aims of the proposed research collaboration. On the roles and research capability of personnel, this section is about answering the question of, have you got the right people in your teams in Australia and China? Under criterion 2, on expected outcomes and benefits resulting from the proposed research, I would highlight the words relevance to the end user partner there. And under utilisation of research outcomes, it's really important for you to clarify and define a clear path to utilisation, and in the same context, you'll need to talk about what happens after the project funding for the collaboration. On the details of governance and intellectual property arrangements, we're looking for what arrangements you have in place for the partnership, including any clear communication strategy. And it's worth noting for the intellectual property arrangements that there's a set of IP principles on the BGA website for the ACSRF that are linked to the guidelines for you to refer to. On criterion 3, it's a short one, so I won't go into any detail on this one, and it's reasonably self-explanatory. On criterion 4, under roles and research expertise of each project partner, including the lead organisation, it's important to have given detailed thought to managing any sort of issues or risks that will arise as part of the collaboration. On the project plan, we expect you to have a ready to implement and practical project plan in place. And lastly, under cash and in-kind contribution and budget, we want you to be able to indicate or provide indicative budget for the eligible expenditure for the GS funding and any cash or in-kind contribution from the lead organisation. I have a question for Mal here. Is there any sort of rules or guidance around the length of the statement against the merit criteria?
Yeah, good question, and there are actually. So we've referred to BGA website, it's business.gov.au is the dedicated website. If you look under the ACSRF banner, you'll find a series of documents that can assist you in putting together your application. One of those in particular is a formatting document, so it talks about if you want to provide graphs or charts and certainly fonts, things of that nature, but it specifically says that all of the merit criteria responses have to be put together within 10 pages. So it's not 10 pages per merit criteria, it's 10 pages in total, and that's just to make it fair for everyone. We understand there are a lot of academics that are interested in applying, and we don't want tomes of information. It just has to be succinct so the assessors can make a fair comparison.
Thank you, Mel. So this brings us to the end of my section of the webinar. I'll now hand over to Mel to talk about AusIndustry's role in assessing the application.
Terrific. So as Sam has said, AusIndustry is actually a part of the broader Industry, Innovation and Science department. We have been in existence for about 20 years and manage grants for a variety of businesses and not-for-profits. Universities obviously fit within that sector. One of the government's hubs, it's called a grants hub. The other grants hub is with the Department of Social Services, and they do a similar role to us, except they provide grant funding to individuals. So as a part of this particular program, we have Sam with the policy team. They piece together obviously the granting program, and then it comes over to us to actually deliver it and maintain it. But obviously it's a partnership between the pair of us, so if there are any issues that come to light during the course of the program, we're all over it together. As I said, AusIndustry has been in existence for over 20 years. In that period of time, we've delivered grants to the tune of in excess of $20 billion. And we've got a fairly large state office network, which you can now see on the screen in front of you. The advantage for that is that you actually have the opportunity to have a local representative come out and visit you if required. So if there are any issues, if you're successful and if there are any issues in the management of your grant, obviously you can contact us in Canberra, but we do have local people on the ground that are very capable of coming to talk you through any problems you might have in delivering your project. They're also up for good news stories as well. So one of the exciting opportunities this program presents is to develop new ideas, new technologies, and of course it's our ministers and the government that obviously want to know about those good news stories as well. So please, if you are successful and as your grant unfolds, if you have something that you feel is a good news story, please come and contact us. I guess the key thing for this element of the discussion is just about how the actual application process works. On the screen you'll see a copy of the guidelines. This is actually on our website, and it's absolutely imperative that you go through the guidelines and identify all of the key elements that you have to respond to in delivering your grant. Our assessment panel that gets together to decide on the grants will use that as their standard. And obviously if there are any issues that you have put forward that they feel are ineligible for funding, then that could rule your application out. So as I said, it's very important that you piece that together. I don't want to harp on it, but budgets are also very important. So you have to turn your mind to, if we're applying for 500,000 as an example, how are you going to spend that 500,000? And the key thing that we look for is the expenditure has to be on what we call eligible expenditure activities. That's really important. As we said earlier, you can have your own funds in kind or cash over and above that, but the government's contribution to your project has to be spent on eligible activities. A classic example that we've used in a lot of the telephone calls that we've had so far is that an eligible expenditure item, for example, is international travel, so that you could go and visit your Chinese partner, but you can't actually use it for domestic travel. So that's something that we would obviously pick up on. You can have domestic travel as a part of your project, but it's something you would have to fund separately, and there's an area in the guidelines and in fact in the application form where you would record that information. As a part of this, you'll see towards the end of this presentation there's a website. If you've ever got questions on what the eligible activities are, or whether or not you've got something that doesn't quite fit in terms of what you can see, then please feel free to contact us. The call centre that we operate has a number which is on your screen as well, and they have a plethora of questions and answers that we've provided to try and cater for all of the possible contingencies, but if there's anything they can't sort out for you, they'll certainly pass you on to us. So the application process, it's now open for applications and closes on the 15th of November, so there's a little bit of time left. It's really important that you read through the guidelines, and I'd also encourage you to download a copy of the application form and go through that to identify the areas that you need to provide information for. We've had in the past, people have decided to start filling out their application form on the day that the program closes, and unfortunately that's not an excuse that we can entertain if you run out of time to fill out the forms and provide the necessary reference materials. So please use this opportunity now to gather together all your information and sort that through. One area that I would like you to consider carefully is something that's called letters of support. When you apply, you'll need letters of support from your Chinese partner or perhaps any other business that might be involved in your project. If I could use an example, we don't want a letter of support that just says, my name's Mel and I'm supporting Sam's project and he's a good bloke, please give him the money. What we really need is a letter to say that, well, my name's Mel, this is my business, this is what I'm doing, I'm providing this amount of funding, if it's relevant, for Sam's project, this is how I'm going to help Sam's project, and obviously a little bit of information about the relationship between Sam and myself. So it gives the assessment panel a better idea and understanding of that there is a genuine partnership and a relationship between the applicants. So it's important to get that those documents put together. We also ask for CVs, and there's some information there about what we would like to see in the CVs, so we can at least understand and appreciate that you've got the opportunity to actually deliver on your project. And one final comment for the universities and academic institutions that are watching, and that is that you're only allowed to be the lead applicant in one project. So if you're coming from a particular university and you know that there are a number of areas there that might be interested in applying for funding under this round, well, you are more than welcome, but you'll need to sort out your own internal EOI type of process to work out who's going to apply. You can be a partner to a second project, but you can only be the lead applicant in one application, so that's quite important. Then moving on to the timelines. So up on the screen you'll have a list of where we're going. So it closes on the 15th. Our panel will be meeting and assessing the projects over the December to very early February period. Once that is finalised, we then provide a list to Sam and his team on our recommended projects. They then start the conversation with the Chinese government to come up with the successful list of who's going to be funded. We are hopeful and planning, in fact, that will be delivered to us and decided in April, because basically from that period in time we've got to get together with the successful applicants and put together a funding agreement so that we can make the first milestone payment and obviously get the projects underway. We've listed on the screen there what we call a preparatory meeting. That's a meeting that will gather together all the successful applicants so we get to meet one another, and we'll literally talk through some do's and don'ts about how we manage the grant moving forward, and obviously what goes into the funding agreement and what information you need to provide to us. But that's the timeline. We will endeavour to update everyone as we go through when we know more information, but if you do apply, understand that we're not really going to have any definitive information about who the successfuls are until towards the end of March, early April next year. I won't harp on this next area too much, other than to say that if you are successful, you'll have to enter into a funding agreement with us. This is a standard document. There's a copy of it on the website, business.gov.au website. This particular document is actually approved by the Department of Finance, and the comment that I make is that really we're not entering into any changes in the structure of this document other than to create obviously your milestone activities and your budget profile. We've had issues in the past where lawyers jump in and want to create new clauses, etc. Our ruling and advice from the Department of Finance is that if there are any nice to have clauses, well, no, but if there are any must have clauses that you feel your project must have a particular article in there, well, we can talk about that. But it's designed to, I guess, streamline the process and not bog everyone down in red tape as far as the funding agreement is concerned. Finally, a couple of little comments there about how the grant is managed. We will be having essentially 2 reporting periods for the successfuls in a given year, and one of those will be for what we call a milestone payment. So you'll get one payment a year. We can create more payment events if that assists your cash flow, but our preference is just to do one payment. So when you're putting together your budget tables in your application form, we would ask you to sort through how much money you would need in year 1, 2 and 3, etc., so that we can manage that particular process. The way it operates for us is that the government provides an appropriation of funding to deliver on these grants, and we get a certain amount in each given financial year. So if you need more money in the first year and less money in the last year, well, that can be possible, but we have to make sure that we can then support all of the other grant projects in terms of what their payment profile is like. So really please give that a lot of consideration when you're piecing together your application. There's a comment there about variations. We can do variations to the funding agreements once they are established, and that does happen from time to time, but we try to give all of our grant recipients a fair degree of flexibility so that there is room to move within the funding agreement framework in the first place. So that's about it from me in terms of that. Up on the screen now you'll see the email address for us, and obviously the business.gov.au website. If you have questions moving forward from today, please feel free to drop us a line, or as I said, call the call centre, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you as you go through. Again, please be careful how you put together your applications. They will be assessed by a panel, so we need to make sure that everything is in line with the guidelines, and you provide all the necessary supporting evidence to ensure your project has the best opportunity for success. Sam, questions from you?
Just a quick plug on the face-to-face information sessions as well that we'll be having across Australia. And the details for the registration for these sessions are on the same BGA webpage, that is www.business.gov.au/ACJRC.
Yeah, good call. So just where you've registered for the webinar today, there's a tab just below that where you can have a look. We're going to most state capital cities to have a discussion. It contains this information, perhaps a little bit more, but certainly we hope that today's opportunity is something that will give you a good head start on putting together your application. So we've got a couple of questions. Should we jump into those now and just see how we go? And as I said, if we run out of time, we'll certainly get back to everyone that corresponds with us. So we'll go down.
So yep, we've been getting lots of questions on the definition or clarification of the term end user.
Yep.
And I can probably help out with that in a sense that it's any party that'll utilise the research outcomes. It's both sort of an eligibility test in that you're required to have an end user partner and an industry partner, but it's a subjective one as well in a sense that the assessors, when they assess the merit criteria, will look at what end user you've specified and how you've given thought to getting them to utilise the research collaboration outcomes as well. So to use sort of the health technologies as an example, hypothetically, if you're developing an app that'll assist people in nursing homes, the end user in that case might even be the individuals that end up using the application. But at the end of the day, it is up to you as the applicant to be able to describe what the end user in that context will be. But it's important to note that it's both an eligibility criteria requirement and a sort of a merit criteria assessment as well.
Okay. We've got another question here. As the ACSRF fund appears to be applied R&D, are both industry partners from both Australia and China required? Now, I think there was a slight change in the guidelines, so you don't have to be a research organisation to apply in Australia. Is that right?
So on that question, the lead applicant for the Australia can be an end user as well technically, and there's nothing in the guidelines that preclude that from happening. Right. Okay. Just going through some of the list here. There's been a lot of questions coming in, so thank you for these. We've got a question here. Can I partner with a research institute based in Hong Kong? Yes. As I said before, the project does allow you to involve international project partners, but the key bit here is that the lead applicant must, on the China side, must be from mainland China. Okay. You've talked about, Sam, the Chinese applications. So we've got here, it says, will the format for the Australian and the China applications be similar? So what do we know about that at this stage? So I can only comment on the format or the process for the Australian government. Right. The Chinese government has its own processes that you will need to factor into.
Okay. Another question's just popped up about the face-to-face discussion and the address for that. Well, it's back on the same website, so if you have a look through there, you'll find a tab where you can register for that as well. Other questions
I have
here?
an interesting question here from Mr. Xiaodong Li. Can we have access to one or two example applications? The answer is no. But if you go to our website on www.science.gov.au/ACSRF, there will be case study examples of previously funded JRCs as well. So it's worth investigating to see what sort of activities were funded before.
Okay, thank you. Some of the other questions here, there's a couple on a similar theme here, so we'll just try and pick those out. Again, there's been some comments here, questions about the criteria for the end user. Again, it's a matter of putting together your project, and you have to, when you go through the actual application form, you'll find a list there where you put down, well, who the lead partner is and who all the supporting people are for the particular project. So that covers that. We haven't been given the closing dates for China yet, have we? But ours is just to primarily focus on the Australian end. The deadline for China is obviously that in early March next year, Sam and the team will be meeting with the Chinese counterparts to go through the project. So it'll happen in that period of time. All right. China, we open that. Okay, I think most of those are similar sort of nature. We've covered a lot of the answers that have come through. Well, look, we might call it a wrap, I think, Sam. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I hope it's been worthwhile for you. As I said, the email address and the web address is on the screen now, so if you have any further questions moving forward, please feel free to contact us. And certainly on behalf of Sam and myself, we wish you all the very best with your application. Thank you.
Before we wrap up, we do intend to address the questions left here individually as well from our ACSF inbox, so bear with us.
Yes, we'll get that. Oh, and I would add, another finally, I love those. We're looking at creating a website blog for this particular, not a blog, what's the word? YouTube thing? It'll be on business.gov.au, so if you've got any friends or colleagues that would like to see this presentation again, there'll be a link on business.gov.au in the coming days to view this presentation again. We're done. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.